there's you, and then you are little. In what sense are you little?
The actions, your deeds, whatever you do in life.
Anything, yeah.
You know, I'm the body for society.
Yeah, that's the killer one, man. So on a grand scale, that the things that you do in this life simply don't matter. So there's a really fascinating, you all know who Hitler was, you've heard of him before. I don't know if you ever stop and think about this, but there will come a day when there will be students sitting in the desks where you're sitting right now who will never have heard of him. We might think like, that's so weird, but what he did was so catastrophic, but no, because time will go by. Maybe it's going to be 20 years, maybe it's going to be 100 years, maybe it's going to be 200 years. But there's going to come a time that even that name, which is so notorious to us right now, is going to be completely forgotten to history, because there will be another genocidal murder to come along. There will be somebody else who's going to come along and do something that's going to arrest our attention. It's like if I were to ask you guys, you guys know Pol Pot?
Yes.
Yeah, you might. But Pol Pot is a leader of Cambodia, and in short, killed about, what, 25% of the population of the country. And so in terms of scale, what stopped him from being worse than Hitler? A small population. You know, he would have had way more. It's just like, for example, you look at how many people were put into concentration camps. If you look at Cuba under Che Guevara and Fidel Castro, they put more people in concentration camps per capita than the Nazis did. So what stopped Che Guevara and Fidel Castro from becoming these, historical monsters? A lack of access. And because of that lack of access, we tend to think of Che Guevara as something other than what he was, and so now we wear him on t-shirts, which I hope if you do that, you catch the irony of wearing him on a t-shirt that you bought and paid for with money. Yeah.
It's like the same thing as Genghis Khan, because he did a bunch of things. He's changed the world by changing even the carbon footprint of the world.
Yeah.
And no one knows about him. We never, like, when we hear the name, we just see a famous Mongolian hero.
Yeah. You guys ever heard of the band The Who? Not The Who, but The Who? You should check them out. They're an interesting band. The and H-U. Not the W-H-O, it's a different band. But they're a band from Mongolia, and they play traditional Mongolian instruments, but they play they call it Mongolian metal. They're pretty popular. They were here. It was interesting. They were here in San Diego like 3 years ago or 2 years ago, something like that. And I didn't know who they were. I guess it was 3 years ago because it was before the COVID stuff. And a friend of mine went to the concert, and that's how I found out about them. He said, "Oh, I checked these guys out." And they paid like $25 a ticket when they were over at the observatory in North Park. And then they were here last year, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta go check these guys out." The tickets were like $100. I'm like, dude, I guess someone got more popular. And they weren't playing in a small venue anymore. They were playing, I think they played over at the amphitheater in Chula Vista. I wouldn't even guess what it's called anymore. It's changed names so many times. But anyway, they sing in Mongolian. They do like Mongolian throat singing. It's interesting. And they have these songs that they praise Genghis Khan. And Genghis Khan, when you look at what he actually did, I mean, it was the warfare that he launched was just horrendous. And it was genocidal. It was specifically designed to wipe out the genetic footprints of something. Like he killed so many people, he literally changed the climate of Earth. That's a lot of people, man. And I don't just, if you know, yeah. So we still praise this person. Some people still praise this person. But yeah, that day will come when no matter how big or how mighty your deed is, that you'll be forgotten. And that's kind of like this larger scale of history. That the things that you do don't matter in the grand scheme of history. It's like you throw a rock into a lake, and it hits the lake and it ripples out, but after a while it smooths back out. You can think of history that way. No matter how big the rock is, even if it's a big boulder and you throw this big boulder, it's a big splash, but eventually it'll come back out. And so there's something in us that frightens us because we realize that no matter how mighty our deed is, the thing that we did, we will no longer be remembered for. I ran this experiment in second grade. This will be interesting. Raise your hands if you guys know your parents' names. Okay? And keep them up. Keep them up. Keep your hand up if you remember if you know your grandparents' names. Okay? Keep your hand up if you remember your great-grandparents' names. your great-great-grandparents' names. Okay, so this class is pretty good. We got 4 generations here. But think back, how far is 4 generations? 100 years? And so we don't, and those are the people who are our family. We came from them, and we don't remember them. We don't know their names. Maybe we have a picture somewhere, but that tells us that no matter how great our deed is, we won't be remembered historically. And then we also recognize that there's very little that we can do in terms of society as well. In other words, how big of an impact can one person have? So there's 2 ways of understanding our littleness here. First and foremost, biological. Biological. And what I mean by that is you're going to die eventually. And that's the frightening thing about this. And Becker, he writes a book, and again, I mentioned it was published in 1974. Notice he dies in 1974. The book comes out 2 months after he dies. He's writing it while he has terminal colon cancer. He knows he's going to die. And he writes this book called The Denial of Death, which, as I was saying before, its subject is not the denial in the terms of like, I don't believe it exists, but quite the opposite, to deny death its power. The reason that death scares us is because we recognize that it's a biological end, that we die, we pass out, and then that's kind of it. So he just kind of says that's the terror of it all. However, we tend to live in such a way that we try to survive death. So he argues that there are these 2 aspects of us, which one is biological, and then there's this other part of us, which we don't really think about, but it's a really powerful thing. We understand that there's a symbolic aspect of us as well. What I mean by that is, so I have a friend, his name is Keith, and if I told you guys that Keith is a lake, I said, Keith is a lake, what do I mean by that? What do you know about Keith's personality? Yeah.
He's very open.
Very open. What else?
Very deep.
Very deep. What do lakes make you think of? Yeah.
Cold.
Cold, in a sense. Yeah. Now, notice, I don't have to come along and tell you guys, oh, Keith is very open, deep, and kind of chill. I'll tell you that. You already know it just by me saying Keith is a lake. That's because there's a symbolic aspect to you. I can go anywhere in the world. I can go to Asia, Africa, South America. I can go to Antarctica if I find some polar bears to talk to over there. And, well, actually, it wouldn't be polar bears. That'd be humans. It'd be part of our symbolic nature. But there's a symbolic nature to us that I can go anywhere in the world, and there's certain symbols that I can just repeat to people, and we all just know what they are by virtue of the fact that we're human beings. Now we can look at that and underplay it, but it is such an important thing because it's the thing that allows us to communicate across time, across cultures, even across cultures in present day. It's what allows us to kind of come together as human beings to recognize that there's a shared nature. We share this nature. We're all going to die. And there's a certain kind of camaraderie that we can have in that because we can like lean on each other. But this is the thing that tells us that we're also going to live. Yeah, I like that. This is the thing that we share together that we're all going to die. But this is the thing that we share together that tells us that we're all alive and that we're going to live. And what we mean by that is that Becker argues in his book that in order to survive this level of death, that we're all engaged in this thing that he refers to as an immortality project. It's the aspects of your life, it's the project of your life to do things to help you be immortal. Now, you can't be immortal in this sense, but you can be immortal in this sense. So, for example, if any of you guys want to have families someday, it doesn't make a lot of sense a lot of times for us. Like, I don't know, man, kids are expensive, they're a pain in the butt, they're all these problems, having to have a spouse, but we still want to do it because we recognize that by joining ourselves to a family, we now matter in some really important ways. If you recognize that you're just one person out of 7.5 billion on this one little planet, which is an inconspicuous blue dot circling one star of about 500 million in our galaxy, one single galaxy, which is one of about 2 trillion in the observable universe, all of a sudden we can seem really, really, really small. So how do you make yourself bigger? How do you make yourself more important? Well, now you join yourself with somebody else. Now you're twice as important. Even though you're not big, you're twice as big as you were. You're twice especially as meaningful as you were before. And then if you have children, then you're even far more meaningful. And now your children, well, even if our great-grandchildren won't remember our name, our great-great-grandchildren in this room won't remember our names, they'll still exist. They'll still, and so in that sense, we survive death. We symbolically become immortal. And you'll find that there are lots of ways that we'll try to expand our meaningfulness. We'll wear like hats for sports teams. Because now, like, I'm a fan. Oh, you're a fan. Now we've joined together with other fans. We'll wear shirts about our favorite, advertising our favorite musicians and bands. Why? Oh, you're a fan. I'm a fan. We'll dress in certain ways that allow us to come together. We'll join political parties. We'll join unions. We'll do all kinds of things as a way of trying to symbolically be bigger than what we are, so that our lives suddenly have far more meaning. And then symbolically, we'll try to transcend death. We can make things like families. We can make things like we can build buildings. We can do things like build a company. We can try to write a book. We can try to pass essentially something that proves that we were here. Because if we can't prove that we were here, which is a real danger, by the way, for people who become alienated from society. They don't seek an immortality. And so if you're not seeking an immortality, then you're only seeking death. And you meet these people. These are people who are very dark. And I'm not just saying that they're depressed, because you can be depressed, and the reason that you're depressed is because you're aware of this. And so maybe you haven't found your immortality project yet, but there are people who won't even seek this. And again, they're dark. There's something about them when you interact with them. You feel like they're walking around, but they're just a corpse. They're dead already. And these will be people who will kind of almost like suck the energy and the life out of those around them. And so they're not seeking anything like this. They're just essentially waiting to die. And you'll meet those folks. But then you'll also meet people who are trying to promote a family, and they don't know why. Or they're building buildings, and they don't know why. They're building a company, and they'll say, oh, I'm doing it to provide for my family. Yeah-ish. But you're trying to make something bigger than yourself that you can leave behind. And so it gets worth asking, or I guess considering what your immortality project is. Because from what Becker's saying, it isn't conscious. You're not aware of it. You aren't sitting there waking up in the morning and going, all right, time to get to work on my immortality project. It's just something by virtue of the fact that you're a human, you have this internal terror. And again, even if you don't realize it, it's unconscious. It's part of your physical nature. And by the way, this is also the thing that makes us humans. You guys have cats and dogs? Your cats and dogs sit in the corner and have existential crises about the meaning of their existence? Probably not. That's part of what it is for us to be human beings, to be self-aware. And you've heard that phrase before, like someone is self-conscious? When we say someone's self-conscious, what do we usually mean by that? We say, oh, this guy's self-conscious, yeah.
They know about what they're doing.
Say what?
They know about what they're doing.
They know about what they're doing? Yeah. Like if I told you I was to come and talk to the class, but I'm self-conscious, what do I mean by that? Yeah.
We are afraid to embarrass ourselves.
Yeah.
We just think about it.
And those two things go hand in hand. You're afraid of embarrassing yourself because you're aware of yourself. Cats and dogs, other animals, are not aware of themselves in the same way that we are, so they don't get embarrassed the same way that we do. They don't feel terror the same way that we do. So that's the, I guess that's the trade-off for being human beings, that we're aware of ourselves. And by being aware of ourselves, we're aware of ourselves. We're aware of our mortality. We know that that's going to, we know how this whole life thing is going to play out. And so we just try to do something to project ourselves into the future. Because again, if I don't have something to project myself into the future, well then it's like I was never here. And if I was never here, then that means that all of the suffering, all of the sadness, all of the misery, in fact, all of the tragedy of life no longer mattered. Like I may as well have never even gone through it. So we have to find something that makes that tragedy and that makes that suffering worthwhile, as I say all the time. We have to find something, we don't get, life is suffering, we don't get to choose not to suffer. We've got to find something that makes the suffering worthwhile, something that helps us to transcend that suffering to keep us going. And if you don't have something like this, then there's no reason to keep going. And then this is when you find people who commit suicide because they don't find, there's like no reason for it. There's a hopelessness that's involved. Having this is to have hope in something. Having none of this and only having this is no hope. Yeah.
So going back to the quote, I searched up the word, endure, and it means suffering patiently. So going back to what you're saying, is it that when something's meaningful it hurts, or is something something that hurts really meaningful?
When you're me, everything hurts. You walk around. When something does hurt, we need to have a meaning for it. In other words, if I take a fork and I put it into a wall socket, this is going to hurt. What's the meaning behind that hurt? What do I derive from it? Nothing. Nothing. I get nothing from it. So why would I do it again? I wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't do it again unless I was getting something out of it. The things in your life that are hurting you, the things in your life that you're having to endure through suffering, there has to be a meaning for it. There has to be a reason for you to get up every morning and continue to do it. Some of you, my goodness, some of you can look at your parents, and I'm sure you can see this. Some of you probably have parents who work jobs that they don't particularly like for less money than they deserve, and they get to come home to us who don't particularly appreciate them, and we can't even turn the light off, man. You know, we can't even close the refrigerator door. We can't just throw the milk carton away or whatever. But why do they do it? Because they find some meaning in that suffering. They find some meaning in that, which is that they provide for us because of a hope that this is going to continue on. So they derive something from it, true. But if this didn't exist, the suffering might not be worthwhile, and there might be nothing worth enduring. So if you have a why, if you have a reason, you can find a how. You'll find a way to make it work. But if you don't have a reason for it, it's just like if I said to you guys, all right guys, everybody run out the door. And you're looking at me, why? Just run out the door, okay? Yeah, but why? You guys don't see Christian with the weapon back there? And all of a sudden you all turn and he's got a rifle. Oh, and all of a sudden we're running for that door. If you don't have a, maybe it's a bad, it's probably a really bad example, but you know the example I'm making. If you have a reason for it, then you're going to get to the business of it. If you don't have a reason for it, then you're not going to. Yeah.
I watched a movie called Fathers 2. It's about like a father who got injured and he became free. And when in his sermon he said we should not pray for an easy life, but the strength to endure an uneasy life.
Yeah. Now, I tell my students this in the jiu-jitsu class that I teach. At the beginning of class, sometimes I say, it's going to be a hard class, it's going to be a hard night. So let's not ask for an easy night, let's ask for the strength to get through a hard one. Okay. Easier said than done, though, right? Especially for me, if I'm not doing the class, I'm just teaching it. Yeah.
I was going to say about meaningful things. Wouldn't that be also how we give a lot of attention to things that are not not worth it? Trans celebrities that are some that are not worth it, but things that are worth good attention, we usually don't give it enough attention.
Like what's not worth it?
Let's say some celebrities that actually they're famous, but they give the wrong message.
So what is worth? So following celebrities is, it's not worth it. What's worth it?
Let's say right now there's a serial killer that is killing Mexicans, but no one gives attention to it, and it's happening these past months, around California, around here, but no one gives attention.
So now you're on a really cool path in life, because now you're already about the business of distinguishing what's not worth your time and what is worth your time. And even at your age right now, you're on a really good track already. The sooner that you can do that in life, the less time and energy you're going to spend and waste on things that don't matter, and the more time and energy in life you're going to spend on the things that do matter. But first you have to know what those things are. And that isn't something I can tell you, but that's something you already know. You know, and if you don't know, if you thought about it, you'd come to that conclusion. But it's hard because we also don't want to find ourselves too influenced. Others? Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?